It's time for a chat with Pat. Loving this conversation today that you've got lined up, Pat.
Yeah, today's guest is David Bonagura. You've heard him on this show before, and you've also heard him on The Virtuous Life. He's the author, most recently, of 100 Tough Questions for Catholics, Common Obstacles to Faith Today. He's also the translator of Jerome's Tears, Letters to Friends in Mourning. He's an adjunct professor at St. Joseph Seminary and Catholic International University, and I could go on, but I went to actually talk to him. So welcome, David. How are you today?
Good morning, Pat. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Advent.
Happy Advent. Yeah, and I love this article, David, because you start out with that you were recently asked, why is the Catholic Church so focused on abortion? And I hear people say this all the time. I hear people within the Catholic Church say that, not just outside the church. First of all, can I kind of pick your brain a little bit about why do people ask that question? What's at the heart of it, do you think?
Well, the world and the culture is obsessed with sex and abortion. The church is just following suit. In other words, the church has been asked to respond to this issue, as she often does. The church is, when it comes to PR and teaching, church teaching is often reactive as opposed to something that they get out ahead of something. She's trying to follow where the people are going. So when clarifying all these teachings about Jesus against all these heresies, when we get the Nicene Creed, which we're celebrating 1,700 years of, with the Pope Leo just in Nicaea, or at least the spot that was Nicaea, to commemorate that major event, right. That was all worked. That whole creed, we say every Sunday, was all worked out to combat certain heresies. So the church is responding to the problems of the age. Likewise, in teaching against abortion, the church is responding to the challenge of abortion, the problem of abortion, because in 1950 and even up to 1960, nobody was talking about this issue. It was not a political issue. It wasn't a cultural issue. It was just not something that happened very, very rarely in hospitals and private settings, but it certainly wasn't the thing that people talked about. But once people started talking about it, well, that's when the church rose to the occasion, and she did so in such a splendid job.
Well, David, one of the things, too, is I think there are a lot of people that think abortion really didn't occur at all until the 60s or 70s. So, but you do a nice job talking about the history of abortion, because I always tell my kids, abortion's been around, like, forever. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, you're exactly right. Abortion's been around forever. As long as there have been human beings, there's been tendencies to sin and to do evil things. And the church from her very beginning has taught that just like thou shalt not kill, and under the umbrella of thou shalt not kill, to kill an abortion, to have an abortion is murder, and likewise infanticide is murder, and therefore it's always wrong. We find that written in the Didache, which is in English translated as the teachings of the 12 apostles, which comes from right around the year 100, give or take a little bit. And ever since then, the church has been clearly, not just thou shalt not kill in general, but very specifically, abortion itself is intrinsically immoral. There's never, ever, ever a justification for it.
David, do you think that the culture just hears it as correction and doesn't hear the forgiveness that the church talks about? I don't know how to get ahead of that.
I think it's hard to get ahead of that. You're right. Because the culture doesn't care, right? The culture just wants to do what it wants. So it only focuses on the church and tries to depict her as this kind of namby-pamby, annoying, overprotective, out-of-touch, paternal organization or something to the effect, when in fact the church is teaching the greatness of life, the beauty of human life as a gift from God, but at the same time, for those who have fallen, those who have made a mistake, those who have sinned, the church offers mercy and the forgiveness of Christ. If we have 1 million abortions every year in this country, that means that's 1 million women in pain, having from the guilt of their sin, and they're in need of healing, and Jesus wants to forgive them, and the church wants to bring them to Jesus and wants them to be forgiven. And so the church has founded this ministry called Project Rachel, which is, you can find it online, hopeafterabortion.com. And there, those who have experienced abortion in any way in their lives can find that peace and healing that only comes through Jesus Christ. So the church gives us the truth about what human life is and how it should not be killed ever in any other circumstance, and also gives us the truth of God's mercy, which we can experience in the sacrament of confession.
So, David, what do you think's behind this movement in our culture now about shout your abortion? Like, tell everybody you had it. It's the best thing that ever happened to me.
It's one of the most despicable things that we have happening in our culture right now. To celebrate murder, to celebrate death, shows how far we have fallen as a culture and as a people, that we've just given up on God, or at least some segments of the culture anyway, have given up on God and decided to celebrate their own sin, their own selfishness, their own unregulated desires. That's the state of a sad, sad culture.
Yeah, it really is. And one of your lines, David, I found, man, I chewed on this for quite a while. When you wrote, "Women have been the evil one's chief target," and you go on to talk about that. Can you explain that a little bit more to our audience? I thought that was brilliant.
Sure. Well, if we look, we can go to the garden where Satan goes after Eve, and then So what does Adam do? Adam follows his wife into sin. And so he goes, for whatever reason, he goes after the woman first. And likewise, he still goes after the woman. Well, why? Well, woman is the author of life. And to attack her is to undermine the entire fabric of the human nature, of the human race. Because when she, who bears life, is suddenly turned against life, well, that ruins the family, that ruins the culture, that ruins society. So the woman is the devil's target here, and she is, when the shout the abortion thing is the biggest lie ever. I mean, women are the biggest victims of abortion. It's not freedom. They're not exercising any rights. They're being abused in these situations, and to pretend otherwise is just to tell them a terrible lie. And thankfully, we have the church out there in the front of the culture war telling the truth about what life is and about forgiveness in Christ.
And it appears that this the evil one is certainly whispering to women, even young women. I read a stat where 3 out of 5 now young women will say, "Yeah, I don't want to get married. I don't think I'll get married." Like, they don't see value in that. Do you think that's kind of all at the heart of this too?
Yes, I think it's connected. Certainly, the idea of sexual liberation, liberated from the family, liberated from the culture of giving life, but instead given it in a way that it's purely selfish pleasure. To what is it? If I'm not going to get, the culture message is to not get married is to say just to live for oneself rather than to give oneself. And we give oneself, of course, in forming a family. The selfishness of the culture is just outrageous, and it's done in a way now where it accentuates this mistaken notion of freedom, where I can be whatever I want, I can do what I want with every person, and if I want to decide, today I'm a man and tomorrow I'm a woman, that's fine. If I want to identify as this or that, that's fine. So says the culture, and it's really one that's it's such a frighteningly evil approach to the world and to this selfish behavior. It's really a sad thing, to put it mildly.
So, David, in this last minute, what can you where do you think, what should we be doing? Is there more we can do as church in this topic of abortion?
We need to continue to pray and to make sure that those who need healing, particularly women who've had abortions, know about Project Rachel, that they can receive the grace of God and be brought back into full communion in the church. I think that's really important. And then we have to continue to teach that life is a gift from God and life is worth living.
Thanks so much, David, and have a great Advent ahead, okay?
Thank you, Pat.
Take care. Bye-bye. And today our guest, David Bonagura, author most recently of 100 Tough Questions for Catholics, Common Obstacles to Faith Today, adjunct professor at St. Joseph Seminary and Catholic International University, and you can read that article on The Catholic Thing online.